For a few brief shiny moments, I thought I've made it, climbed the mountain. That 17, 18-year-old Sue, I'll show you that I'm not stupid and that everything I thought I was before this moment happened at 17 brought me to my knees. It didn't define me forever. In fact, it drove me.
Welcome, Carr. Joe and I are looking forward to our conversation with you today.
Thank you, Anne. I'm looking forward to speaking with you and Joe as well.
Tell us about a challenge or maybe an event that shaped your journey.
At 17 years old, oldest child in a family, growing up, doing my year 12 year, I found that I was pregnant. Not an easy realization. In fact, I spent quite some time convincing myself that it wasn't going to be true. I was in complete and utter fear and turmoil. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't tell a soul for 3 months.
Mm.
I just kept wishing and hoping that the outcome would be different tomorrow. And it was possibly, if not the time I've been the most terrified in my life, it was certainly right up there. That part of my life happening so young, I think it is the one that shaped me. But I haven't been able to realise, perhaps until I'm older, just how many wonderful things happened walking through that fear, accepting help from once the help came. It really has been pivotal in what kind of person I've become. The fear was absolute terror. Like, I've frozen. I don't know what to do. And I just want someone to magic this away from me, really. That's how I felt. I was on my own, I had ended the relationship with the man who is my son's father. Then it was only through a conversation that happened one night, normal family night in a suburban house in Melbourne. My mum was serving up the roast dinner and she said to me, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Nothing." And she said, "Sue, what's wrong?" And I said, "Nothing." And she said to me, "You're pregnant, aren't you?"
Wow.
My 17-year-old self thought, how did she know that? And I didn't ever think about it until later that perhaps she and my dad might have had a conversation about their concerns about me and that perhaps this was the night that they were going to ask the question. I didn't think of any of that. I guess I thought she was magic in a way. Anyway, with that, she put down the knife and the fork, went into the lounge room, said to my dad, "You'll need to finish serving up the dinner. Sue and I are going for a drive." And we drove from our house to a local bayside beach and we sat in the car and we talked and I cried for a long time and told her all the things I didn't want to do and what I did want to do. And she was amazingly supportive and just listened and said, "Whatever you want to do, we'll support you." I probably wasn't aware at the time, but there was relief that fear had finally at least been shared, if not lifted. And I know when I went home that night, my dad didn't see me. I went to bed and I think for the first time in 3 months, I actually slept.
Mm.
When I woke in the morning, it was him waking me up with a cup of tea and Vegemite toast and saying, "It's all going to be okay," and giving me a hug. And from then we moved on and then kept stepping through the next fear thing and the next fear thing. Some of those next things were having to go and tell my school, where I was the house captain and I wouldn't have been considered the girl who this was likely to happen to, or at least that's how I saw myself. I don't think anyone else would have thought that would be me either. So I went with my mum to the school, Catholic girls' secondary school. We went through the front door. I've never been through the front door in that institution before. I remember the darkness, the smell of furniture polish, the holy pictures, the flowers, and then I don't remember a great deal after that. I think my mum did most of the talking. Two nuns, Brigidine nuns, who were listening to me, and they actually said, "Would I like to continue the year?" I said, "Absolutely no way." Via said, "How could you possibly show up in a school uniform and go on the bus and go through all of that?" I decided that was definitely not for me. As it turned out, the day I had my baby was the day of the Year 12 English exam. So I couldn't really have made a success of my HSC as it was then anyway.
Back to the moment that for 3 months you carried that burden, and then that day that your mum asked the question,
Mhm.
what's wrong? How important do you think that was for you to be able to share the burden of what you were feeling at that time?
I think it was enormously important. I don't know how I would have continued because very soon it was going to become obvious. Maybe it was a little bit obvious already and I just didn't know. Maybe it's a mother's intuition too. She was always a great and supportive mum, and there's that real sense of safety in being able to share something really scary, something totally unexpected, something new, and something that ultimately changed the direction of the life I thought I was going to have. So to some degree, peace came then, even though there was a lot more to worry about. Obviously, physically having a baby. I turned 18 by the time I had Ben, but, you know, in the life that I've lived, it's not very old. I think a burden shared is that was an amazing gift.
Mm,
And as a mother of 5 now, I think about what she and Dad actually took on in embracing the situation in the way that they did, especially in the decade that it was in too. You know, it was 1975. Some people who were not in as happy situations as mine were having their children taken from them. And that was never an option for me. So to answer your question, Anne, it felt like all of a sudden I wasn't holding this whole fear monster all by myself. I actually had someone older, wiser, and very reassuring supporting me as best they could.
mm.
Yeah.
And so, did it shift your perception of yourself up until that pivotal moment when your mother said, "What's wrong, Sue?" What was going through your mind about yourself and whether you could share this burden? And did that, in fact, shift when your parents accepted you and accepted what had happened?
I guess maybe it did. I often think in my work as a principal, when I talk to kids and there's something, and I work with primary school children, but when you know something is bothering them and they actually can't make the words come out, that's exactly how I was. I remember thinking so many times, maybe I could just tell someone. I could not even picture myself with the words coming out of my mouth. You know, I've wondered over time, is that a perfection thing and a view that I had of myself that I was the oldest, I was always smart and responsible and good girl and did the right things? Was it letting that facade slip a little bit? I don't know whether I had the maturity at 17 to actually think of it like that, but I could literally not make those words come out of my mouth. My parents have been a great gift. And my sense of myself now is it's probably made me who I am, all of those experiences, and also how I work, how I am with other people. Because one of my overriding messages that I'd like to give people, it's not where you start or it's not what happens, but it's about how you, with support, choose to take a step. And sometimes in fear, the only thing you can do, even if you can't take a step, maybe even just turning your head in a slightly different direction will change the perspective. So maybe me just hanging out in the kitchen while mum was serving up the dinner was enough for her to know that that was the moment to ask the question. And it must have been just as scary to ask. And I'm sure if I think about human emotions, probably whilst there would have been fear for her and Dad wanting to know, I guess also a little bit of frustration and I don't know if disappointment's the right word, but their world was going to change too because of the situation I was in. It was a momentous moment in the whole story, which ended very happily. In fear, if you can have someone who's near you even. And when we're really in fear, we don't always know how to reach out.
I can't help but feel that the absolute love within your family was the very thing that took that fear away.
Absolutely. Love was at the centre of my family. I think the other thing too, with reference to my mum, she had grown up losing her mother at 10 years old. She was the oldest of 7 children. So to her, the role of mother was everything. as I've gotten older, I've realised she was almost trying to nurture herself through nurturing us, sometimes to the point that was possibly a little on the unhealthy side at times. But she had enormous needs too. All she knew was she did not want one of her kids to feel alone, abandoned, unsupported. She was very much the more active and vocal parent, and Dad was the stronger, quieter supporter. But on this, they were absolutely united, and they each gave the support and the love in their own different ways.
So I'm curious, that gift that your parents gave you in that moment. So you mentioned you were the eldest, you were always the good girl, you were always the one that, you didn't think others would expect that something like this would happen to you. Once your parents embraced what had happened, embraced you as their equally good girl who happened to be pregnant, did that shift your perspective of yourself?
Yeah, I think I thought I was a good, worthy person, but I think I spent a lot of time wanting to prove that I wasn't stupid, that I wasn't ignorant, that I was as smart as I thought I was. I wanted to prove to people, not necessarily by having a big conversation with them, but I always wanted to show up as capable, confident. Found it difficult to say when I wasn't in control or I was struggling. I always wanted to show I was the one who had it all together and watch me. I stayed home with my children. I had 4 more after I had our oldest son, but I stayed home with them until the youngest was 3, and then I went to study. And it was incredibly important to me to become a teacher, which is what I wanted to do and was going to do, has had my world spun in a different direction. Yes, I did feel good enough in myself, but there was a bit of me that wanted to prove. And is that ego? I'm not sure. As I've grown older, and a few people have said to me, you're very comfortable sharing a lot about your life. And I think the reason I feel like that is because I want to say you can grow and you can evolve and you can change and you can be a gift to other people through sharing something that happened to you and showing how far you can travel, how far you can progress in life. And that message for me is really important for women in particular. I just want to say you don't have to be what you've always been. If you want to change, you can. You can through taking very small steps and leading yourself. You can grow and change and evolve.
So did you inherently know that, Sue, back then?
I wonder.
Yeah.
That's my answer. I wonder. Having recently written a book, I've thought a lot about all of this as now an older person. Well, I am older. I am older than I was when I was 17. Maybe I did inherently know that. Maybe it's just about articulating it and finding a way to say these things so that other people benefit. Because I have felt comfortable in my own skin for a long time. People will say to me, it's interesting that you move with such ease among all sorts of people. And I do remember that as a kid, I was like that. I don't know, maybe that's part of that. I don't really like to use the word shame because I don't ever want my son to feel that there's shame attached. But in a way, it's that we put out an image to the world and all of a sudden it's torn away a little bit and it's, well, no, actually, this is what it looks like right now.
Around that piece of being very solid within yourself, and you did say that started at a very young age. Tell us more about how you knew that you were that solid person in the world and you had a good self-image of yourself.
In part, my parents gave it to me, whether it was being the oldest and therefore you're required to be responsible and resourceful in a way, although I never had to be resourceful in order to survive because we were always well supported. Whether it was being first and having my parents' undivided attention for the first 3 years of my life until my sister came along, it was just me. I don't know what builds that confidence into people, but I think people taking the time to invest in you and be interested in you and let you know that you matter and that your thoughts matter and that they're proud of the little things that you do and that someone else notices, all of those things build confidence. I can think of times where I didn't feel like I got that too, but I think that's normal. That's normal childhood and normal families. I must have had enough of it. I'm sure there had to be influences that made me be the person I am.
What about today, Sue? People actually notice that you can walk through life and you can be the person that you are and fully confident. What's that part of you inside that feels that so strongly?
I've done a lot of work on myself. I've been lucky enough to study positive psychology. I've been lucky enough to do some coach training. I've done leadership training. I'm very interested in how to be the best, most well-rounded person I could be. Once I learned about the importance of knowing what your values are, what are the things that guide my life and direct the path I go on? What are my not negotiables almost? Or what has to be right for me to be right? Once I actually really named those and used them as a bit of a guide or a yardstick for what I was going to do in my life, that really helped. Another thing that helped is, and this was challenging, but developing the self-belief statements. Some people call them I am statements or affirmations. I call them self-belief statements. And I worked really hard over quite a period of time to develop mine. My list is ridiculously long. Most people have about 4. They might have them on their bathroom mirror. I have quite a long one, and I found myself adding them in when I was writing the book. I was telling myself I am a writer, thinking I don't know if I am a writer. Those things where you tell yourself every day, I am this, or I'm aspiring to be this. Those values and statements, if you use them, it's like a new pair of shoes that you wear in. They become more comfortable the more you think about it and try to live by and up to that.
What are your top 3, or if you're willing to share?
Okay. I am strong. I am confident. I am resilient. I can adapt to change and learn new things.
Mm.
They're my top 4.
Wow.
A wonderful coach I worked with turned me on to this. Now it's just part of my daily morning routine. She said, say them in the bathroom, looking at yourself in the bathroom mirror, and I'd be in the bathroom looking at the vanity. Now I can do it quite easily, and I couple that with some breathing work. And that's part of my every morning setup of my day. And I've been doing that for about 2.5 years.
What does that feel like when you say those? What's the feeling you get within?
I make myself stand with my feet slightly apart, flat on the floor, shoulders straight on to the mirror, and I eyeball myself. I couldn't do it initially, but I eyeball myself. Partly a surge of energy, and it's partly like an anchor. It's like I've got this upward energy and I've got something grounding me. And there have been times, sometimes in my personal life, I'm going through a really sad thing at the moment where my mum has Alzheimer's.
Oh,
And
sorry.
that's okay. Some days, sometimes those statements are powerful for that. I have been known to go into a quiet space at work if I'm about to have a challenging meeting. I've learned how to better manage that bit that tends to run to fear very quickly. The fear's still there, and the fear will come from all sorts of things all the time. But I've learned that that's a bit of an anchoring tool and a little bit of an energy. Those things coupled with breath really help. I also journal every day, not for very long, but I always write intentionally about how I want to show up. What am I focusing on and how I want to show up? And then at the end of the day, I write 3 things I'm grateful for.
How
That
powerful do you find those for you?
incredibly, I began the journaling a very long time ago after I did a course in positive psychology. And so I've been doing it for, I don't know, maybe 8 years. I did have a little period where I stopped. I think I stopped because I was in something a bit tricky, and I realized one day this actually helps. So now every day I'll have to do something with them before I die, because I don't really know if anyone's going to want to read the musings of Sue, but I don't write a lot. There's ritual around the saying I am or how I would like to show up today, and this is what I'm concentrating on. And then the gratitudes at the end, I think, is really important.
So I want to take a moment. You have these really lovely rituals and tools and strategies that are guiding you now. To take you back to that 17-year-old who gave birth on the day of your English exam when your fellow students were in fact still studying,
Yeah.
and your trajectory, as you said, was different to the one that you thought at the time. What back then kept you putting one foot in front of the other to keep you going then? Because that was a big challenge, obviously.
It was a really big challenge. My closest friends and I had decided that at the end of year 12, we all had part-time jobs. We would continue to work and then we would go overseas. I watched my two best friends go overseas while I went to say goodbye at the airport with a baby. I want to say it's resilience, but I also want to say that perhaps the family I was surrounded by didn't make it feel that hard. I also met my husband only 6 months after my son was born. We were both very young, too young probably to make the commitment and the decision that we made to be a family together. But we've muddled our way through it since 1976, 5.5 years living together and then marriage and then four more children. I think it's the people who are around me. My friends stayed my friends, although they said they had no idea what I had actually gone through. And most of them did the more usual, more normal thing and had their babies in their 30s and said, we didn't even know what to say to you or how to help you or anything. They were still my friends. And my family, my parents were wonderful in that they didn't allow me to miss out on social things at night time where they could babysit. I still had that ability to go and I was in it and I was part of it and it was fun, but the responsibilities were very different. And if I got home very, very late, or if we got home very, very late after whatever we were doing, the reality was still that baby might wake up at 5 o'clock. And if you'd got home at 4 o'clock, well, bad luck, that baby's yours. My husband, what he took on at that young age, no idea. But I guess what we did is we grew up together and we had enough good people around us to help us muddle through. I also have a sister who's way younger than me, closer to my own son's age. I was used to children. I'd been the neighbourhood babysitter. I had a lot to do with my youngest sister. And so I was confident in the mechanics of looking after a little child. And for the first 18 months, we lived at the back of my parents' house. So I had support and not support all at once. It was that lovely balance of we're doing this on our own, but if help was needed, advice was needed, it was there. People around me really helped.
It sounds, Sue, like you had an incredibly wonderful foundation, not just the support, but equally the experiences that you'd had in life by taking care of your sister, by your friendship group. So those foundations were really, really solid. When you were building the walls, so to speak, of life, you always had that to know that this foundation is going to hold me in good stead.
Yeah. Those things, although they're not made explicit to you, except that they're made explicit by the fact that they actually just operate all the time, that builds confidence without you really realising where the edges are. You know who you can rely on. And the main players gave me different things. What I got from my mum, I got very different from my dad. My dad was the much more practical. He was a bank manager, making sure I had private health insurance from the moment that child was born and talking about the importance of having a spare $1,000 in case your washing machine broke or you couldn't pay a bill. He was very much that practical kind of loving support. Mum was much more the emotional and the day-to-day. And it's been interesting watching my own kids parent. I realised that I parented partly like my mum, but I changed the bits I didn't necessarily like. I changed to my own flavour. And I've watched my kids parent very similarly to us, but with tweaks. It takes a village, really. And I just happened to have, it wasn't perfect. And there were people in that close family circle who've had really big challenges. But there was something there that was the glue that held us all together. At the very bottom of it all was love. Sometimes not perfect, but it was love. And it was that idea that you stick together and you support each other. And my husband came from a very similar sort of family. Different style, but that we're there for each other. That was the gift that helped me get over the fear.
Mm.
There's been many, many more fearful moments since then, of course. And you know, I think some of those come from parenting. When you're the mother and watching your kids go through things that are hard or scary, or you're not quite sure what the outcome is going to be. And then it's just that learning to manage yourself in every moment.
It's an important point. It's about the learning that you've taken from that
Mm.
experience. That part between giving birth to Ben at 17 and having your own family, what was that growth that happened during that time? What were the things that really stood out for you?
Number one, knowing that I was doing a pretty good job of looking after that little boy. I do know that in that first 6 months when I was on my own, although I didn't have a negative reception from anyone really anywhere I went, I know there was talk about it, not to my face. Stories that mum and dad were going to say that the baby was theirs, and which was never true. Probably some judgment from people, but I just felt that if I showed up as me, I was determined to love that child from the minute I decided that that's what was going to happen. So just show up as me and do the very best I could. My parents' friends were really quite lovely in that circumstance. I can remember gifts. One family bought a pusher, and another family on Ben's first birthday bought the little scoot-along bike. They were kind with gifts. They were always encouraging. I didn't ever feel like I was put in a position where I had to explain too much. It was just people watched me and then my husband and I evolve as this was just Sue and Andy with their baby. So after feeling supported in the community and the family I grew up in, one thing I didn't do, which I often smile about, is I was very reluctant to go to the maternal health. I didn't want to go there. And if I look at Ben's book compared to the books of the other kids, the visits were few and far between. But I went along as a mum doing all the things, and then it came time for kinder, and I showed up at kinder. And I must have looked extraordinarily young compared to everybody else, but I went and did all the things a kinder mum would do. And then the same at school. I can remember not so much when he started prep, but when he was in year 2, we moved to the house that we had bought. And all of the kids he was friends with, they were the youngest in families. The parents were nearly as old as my parents. I don't know what they thought of us, but I just thought, keep stepping up. You are his mum. You go and do all of the things that the other mums do. Back in the day when you used to make a cake for the cake stall, or you go to the meeting, I just kept showing up. And then I had a wonderful opportunity, which came actually at the primary school where the kids went to school. The person who was the principal had been a year 12 student when I was a year 7 at my school. And she said to me one day, "You've always wanted to teach. Have you ever thought about going back?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, but I don't know when the right time is and I don't know where I'd go." She said, "Why don't you come in and volunteer and keep a journal of what you do when you work at school? You don't have to be in your children's classes." I did that. Then one day she just happened to walk by and wave a mid-year intake enrolment form at me. And next thing I knew, I'd applied to go and study teaching. The theme that keeps coming back is there were good people around me, and it's about taking the opportunity when someone points you towards it or waves a form in front of you. It's about whatever it is inside that says, take that step. It's about keeping on showing up. Now, I'm aware that for many people, that's a really challenging thing. People without support, people without any confidence, people without any encouragement, it's harder to keep showing up day in, day out. I was lucky enough to have the building blocks of love and support and encouragement, although my mum, interestingly, was a bit reluctant about me going to study. She thought, because of her experiences, that good mothers stayed home with their children forever. She thought that my children were going to be very sad, very lonely, and somehow a little bit damaged because their mother had abandoned them and gone to study. But she was very proud when I became a teacher and then a headmistress, as she likes to call me, not a principal. It's about what's around you, what you can see, and what you're prepared to grab onto. One of the reasons I want to give my message is that a lot of people feel like they've got nothing to grab onto. And what I want to say is even the tiniest step will build your confidence, will show you something that you couldn't see when you were one step back.
Part of that keeps showing up. You mentioned along the way there were different judgments, and you said that your family kept them away from you. But then you turned up at the kinder and you were a much younger mother, but you kept on telling yourself, just show up, you are his mother. Was it that you weren't listening to other people's judgments, how they affected you?
Just show up sounds maybe, I don't know, a little bit Pollyanna or Mary Poppins. I'm not quite sure. There was a part of me that also thought, I'll show you. There was a little bit of that I am capable enough, good enough. And I remember when I applied for principalship, and for a few brief shiny moments, I thought I've made it. I've climbed the mountain. That 17, 18-year-old Sue did become a teacher, did have 5 children, did study, and now has got this job. I know that's not the peak of the mountain, but it was something that I achieved that I was really proud of. And there is a little bit in me, I'll show you that I'm not stupid, and that everything I thought I was before this moment happened, that really, as much as it could at 17, brought me to my knees. It didn't define me forever. In fact, it probably drove me in some ways. Would I have done all this had that circumstance not happened? Probably, and probably earlier. But to start teaching at 39, I think it was a relatively short journey to principalship, and I'm proud of that. But I know also that and this is still in me, I know there's so much more I want to do. And the direction and the focus is shifting. While I'm in this job, I will do this job to the very, very best of my ability, but there are other things I want to do. And I'm not done yet. I just wanted to let my actions and my achievements and success, for whatever that is, speak for themselves. Yeah.
There's an inherent driver in you, Sue, wherever it comes from, whether it's ego, whether it's I'll show you, but there's a driver within you that says, I'm going to make the most out of whatever I have been given in my life.
Absolutely. I don't like to say the third act or the whatever this last bit is. I turned 68 this year. I want the last bit to be great too. I'm comfortable in my own skin now, and there's so much that I know and that I want to do that are in slightly different directions. I also want some time to enjoy just being. I want to say to people, as long as you're alive, given that nothing dreadful happens to you, it's about making every day as good as it can be. I don't want to just fade away. I don't want to just become an old lady who no longer does things that she wants to do, whatever they are, simple things or bigger things. I want to keep growing and evolving and living a life.
Is that what great means to you, growth and evolvement, or does it mean something different? What's your vision of great?
Great overall is being happy in your own skin. I had lunch with one of the girls that I should have gone on the plane with all those years ago, and she has retired and she lives in the city. She lives with her husband. There are no children. And I know what great is for her is very much different to what great is for me. I just like the idea of not giving up, but I don't want to just settle. And I want to say to other people, you don't have to just settle. So whether that's growing 5 plants in your backyard that you get veggies from, or whether it's being able to all of a sudden walk 10Ks if you can't at the moment, or whether you want to change your career. Don't settle. Live, squeeze every bit of life out of whatever it is that you've got left. That's what great is.
Mhm.
Truly living. If you can give to others and inspire someone else along the way, well, that's some people's journey. I know since I've written the book, the people who've spoken to me and said, oh, I loved it, or I could relate to it. And I'll always ask which bit. I like to know which part spoke to them and why. Not everybody wants to do that, but I enjoy that. To me, great is just squeezing every last drop out of life, being a good person, not hurting anybody else in the process, but doing as many of the things that I want to do. Showing my family, I think they're proud of me, and my boys who are men are funny. They used to say when they were younger, if I was doing a course or they'd say, where's mum? Oh, she's off embracing her inner goddess. We all need to embrace our inner goddess to a degree, whatever that might be for each of us. And I look at younger women and I just want to show that we, as we get older, we don't just fade away. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be invisible and having my image rubbed out. I want to live till I stop. I have fear right now around a number of things. It's about what can I do? What do I know? What tools do I have? What do I know helps as I try to manage what might be completely out of my control or unexpected or inevitable, whatever those things are. Great's about bringing energy and grace to whatever you do.
Wonderful words of wisdom. And obviously it's lovely to see, Sue, that you're saying you want to live every last drop, and it sounds like you really have. The 17-year-old, the journey through having 4 more children and then studying, you have squeezed every last drop in your journey, and it sounds like you're going to continue.
I'm going to try my best.
So given, and you already have alluded to what some of the greatest gifts have been of the experiences, but what is the greatest gift of everything that you've shared so far?
I can't tell the story of what my fear was without saying there's the gift of the child, my son, who will turn 50 in November.
Wow.
I can't believe that he'll turn 50 in November. The children who came after him and my husband's, that family that we've created, knowing that through all the hard bits, we've actually made a really lovely family. That's a gift. The other gift is the realization of what a privilege it is, what a privileged life I have, just to be born in this country, in the suburb, the circumstances. It's not lifestyles of the rich and famous for me by any stretch, but the gift of the life where I've landed. I could have landed in Gaza. You've got to appreciate what you have. So the gift is appreciation, that real respect for life itself and what it brings and what opportunities it shows you. And for all the subtleties and nuances of life. That's what I love. Because sometimes when we look in the unexpected places, that's where we find the gifts, we find the treasures, we find the next way to turn. The greatest gift is actually just life and the willingness and the joy in living it.
What message would you give your 10-year-old self?
I would want to tell myself, you are good enough. Have a go. Don't hold back because you think you might not be as good as somebody else. Just grab the opportunities and show up. This idea that the last word of my belief statements is I am enough, which I know a lot of people have. We are all enough. Once we accept we're enough and then think, well, yes, and what can I do to enhance that enoughness? I think for a 10-year-old, you're worthwhile, you're special, have a go, get involved. Don't hold back because you think you might not be the best or good enough.
Lovely
Don't have to be
messages.
perfect.
And so I know the last one's going to be tricky because you have a whole book full of tips. If you could distill down your top tips for others going through similar journeys, what would they be?
Define your values. What's not negotiable for you? Be grateful for what you have. Look for opportunities for support. And you can't do that if you stay silent, which is what I did when I was 17. I probably stayed silent far too long through fear. Take a step. You're not too old. This is in the book. You're not too old. You're not too young. It's not too early and it's not too late to start. Just take a step and do something. Action almost takes the fear away a little bit.
So I know we're just about to finish, but you've referenced the book a few times. I'm
Oh,
sure our
sorry.
listeners would.
So it's called Too Strong for Too Long.
Okay.
And the subtitle is A Self-Leadership Map to Guide Your Journey.
Thank you, Sue. And I've just loved hearing you've actually lived all of those tips yourself. What a beautiful way to share with our listeners how it's not just advice. You have actually lived those tips and you've shown us the strong you at the end of this. Your story has been very inspiring. Thank you so
I
much.
can't
Sue.
thank you enough, both of you, for the opportunity and for making it so comfortable. Thank you again.
Okay, that's our episode for today of What's Fear Got to Do with It. Thanks so much for your company. We hope you found it insightful and it left you with some helpful tips from our guests and some great points for you to reflect on. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Substack or follow us on your favourite platform. Leave a review. We'd love to know your thoughts. Maybe you'd like to be a guest or you know someone who you would like to hear their story. Reach out to us on Insta at whatsfear_podcast or email us at info@whatsfear.com. All the guests' show notes are below to find their tips. And until next time, from Jo and I, take care, stay curious and keep the conversation going.